All right, let's dive in. Today, we're taking a deep dive into date nut bread.
Date nut bread.
You sent in some interesting sources, including a recipe from cookerdiary.com. And I gotta say,
Oh, yeah, Cooker Diary.
it got me thinking, there's got to be more to this than just like the basic how-to.
Right, right.
So let's uncover the story behind this treat, okay?
Eh.
And by the end, I'm hoping we're both ready to bake up a storm.
I am already. What I find so interesting about date nut bread is that it's not just some, trendy recipe.
Yeah.
It actually has a pretty long history. Like, its popularity goes way back, especially in the early 1900s.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Early 1900s, so it's like a vintage recipe with a modern appeal.
Exactly.
That's so cool.
Yeah, so, like, think about it, right? World War I was happening. Resources were scarce.
Right.
Home cooks, they needed nutritious, affordable ways to feed their families.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And date nut bread, with its natural sweetness from dates and protein from nuts, it was perfect. And, back then they were really promoting dates as a healthy alternative to sugar, which was in short supply because of rationing.
Oh, so it was like wartime ingenuity meeting deliciousness.
Exactly. It's like a sweet reminder of how resourceful people can be.
I love that. Okay, so speaking of today, let's get to that recipe, that cookerdiary.com recipe. Even though I'm more of a takeout person, this one, I gotta say, it seems pretty approachable.
Oh, it is. The instructions are super clear. Like, for example, the first step is pouring boiling water over the dates.
Okay.
And, this might seem like a really basic step, but it's so important. It softens the dates. It makes sure they're evenly distributed in the batter.
So it's not just about, like, hydrating them. It's about making sure they don't clump up.
Exactly.
You don't want those, like, date bombs in every slice.
Exactly. It's all about that consistent texture.
Right, right.
Which is, like, key for any good bake.
Makes sense.
Now, another detail that might seem small, but it makes a huge difference, is sifting the dry ingredients.
Okay, so why is sifting so important? Is it just about getting rid of those lumps?
Well, yeah, it does that, but it's also about incorporating air into the mixture.
Well,
And that creates a lighter, fluffier texture in your final product.
okay, yeah, so it's like,
Think about it like this. Have you ever noticed how a cake made with well-sifted flour has that delicate, feathery crumb?
I have.
That's the magic of sifting. It's one of those little things that can really make a difference.
Okay, I'll definitely be paying more attention to that from now on.
Yeah.
So what else stands out to you in this recipe?
I love that it encourages experimenting
Yeah.
with different nuts or like adding spices,
What
it's like
spices?
cloves. It gives you this basic framework, but then you can just make it your own.
Yeah, like a little personal flair. I like that.
Exactly.
So even though we're deep diving into this recipe, it's not like set in stone.
Right.
Now, I am curious though about like the nutritional side of things. Dates are naturally sweet, but is date nut bread considered a healthy choice? I mean, it has bread in the name.
Well, we always want to enjoy treats in moderation.
Right.
But date nut bread does have some nutritional benefits.
Okay, good.
It's packed with fiber.
Yeah.
From the dates and the nuts. And that helps with digestion, keeps you feeling full longer.
Oh, perfect.
Plus, dates are a good source of potassium
Yeah.
and magnesium. And those are important for things like blood pressure and muscle function.
Right.
Of course, it has some natural sugar,
Right.
but it's not like the refined sugar that you find in a lot of processed snacks.
Okay, so it's a treat you can feel good about. I like that.
Yeah.
And the Cooker Diary recipe even breaks down like the nutritional content per slice. So, for people who are watching their intake, that's super helpful.
Absolutely.
Okay, so now are you ready to like explore all the different variations out there?
Oh, I'm ready. This is where things get really exciting.
I know, because the sources that you sent, they mentioned everything.
Chocolate chips, coconut oil, gluten-free options.
Yes. It's like date nut bread can be whatever you want it to be.
Exactly. And what I find fascinating is how these variations reflect like broader culinary trends.
Oh, interesting.
For example, gluten-free baking.
Okay.
It's huge right now. And so the sources suggest using a gluten-free flour blend or even experimenting with things like almond flour or coconut flour for like a grain-free twist.
I love that. Food's always evolving.
Yeah.
It's like tradition meets modern needs. But I gotta say, let's be honest, some variations are just about pure indulgence.
Mhm.
Like That chocolate chip date nut bread.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, come on.
Adding chocolate chips, it's such a simple thing,
Yeah.
but it's so effective.
Yeah.
Elevates the sweetness, adds that little bit of decadence, and the sources even recommend using dark chocolate.
Oh, interesting.
It creates a really nice contrast that balances out the sweetness of the dates.
Oh, dark chocolate and dates. That sounds like a gourmet pairing. Okay, but let's say I'm in the mood for something more tropical. I noticed a variation using coconut oil. Any tips on that one?
Oh, yeah. Coconut oil can definitely add that subtle tropical sweetness. It goes really well with the dates. But the key is using room temperature ingredients.
Mm.
So that includes the coconut oil. Make sure it's room temperature because that ensures that everything blends smoothly.
Yeah.
You don't want that lumpy texture.
Right.
Think about it, like when coconut oil is cold, it's solid,
Yeah.
hard to mix.
Right.
But when it's at room temperature, it gets all soft and pliable.
Okay, so room temperature is key.
Yes.
I'm writing that down. Okay, now I am also intrigued by the idea of adding like dried fruits, like cranberries,
Yeah.
raisins. It's like a fruit explosion in every slice.
Oh, yeah. Dried fruits add a wonderful a textural complexity.
Okay.
They contrast with the softness of the bread and the crunch of the nuts.
Right.
Just remember, though, if you're adding a lot of dried fruit, you might want to adjust the sugar
Oh, right.
because dried fruits can be pretty sweet on their own.
Yeah, you want that balanced sweetness.
Yeah.
Now, I never would have thought of this, but one of the sources mentioned adding citrus zest.
Oh, yes.
Is that as good as it sounds?
It is surprisingly refreshing.
Okay.
Like a little touch of lemon or orange zest, it adds this bright citrusy note, kind of cuts through the sweetness, adds another layer of complexity. Think about it like how a squeeze of lemon brightens up a rich dish.
I do, yeah.
It's the same concept.
Okay, citrus zest added to my list. But what if I wanted to make this date nut bread even more? Like wholesome,
Yeah.
boost the fiber content a bit.
Well, you could experiment with whole wheat flour,
Okay.
swapping out some, or even all of the all-purpose flour with whole wheat flour. It adds a nutty flavor,
Ooh.
a slightly denser texture. It's a great way to increase the nutritional value without sacrificing taste.
I like that. I like how you're encouraging experimentation because it's empowering, like I can adapt the recipe, make it fit my own, preferences and needs.
Exactly.
But, sometimes I just want to go all out, especially if I'm baking for like a special occasion. And the idea of adding cream cheese frosting to date nut bread, brilliant.
I completely agree. Cream cheese frosting, it just adds that touch of indulgence. It transforms the bread into like a dessert-worthy treat. And for those who avoid dairy, there are plenty of delicious plant-based cream cheese options out there.
Oh, perfect. So no matter what, you can have your frosting and eat it too. Okay, before we move on from variations, I want to touch on something practical. The Cooker Diary article mentions making date nut bread ahead of time, which for busy people like me, that's perfect. What were their storage recommendations again?
They suggested storing the bread in an airtight container at room temperature for up to 3 days.
Okay.
And, if you want to extend the shelf life, you can freeze it.
Oh, yeah. Freezing's a lifesaver.
It is. Just wrap the loaf tightly in plastic wrap
Okay.
and then place it in a freezer-safe bag. And then you can enjoy your homemade date nut bread for up to 3 months.
That's amazing. Okay, what if I'm, like, using pecans instead of walnuts?
Yeah.
And I want to know if the bread is done. Does the toothpick test still apply?
Absolutely. The toothpick test is a classic for a reason. It's reliable.
Okay, good.
Just insert a toothpick into the center of the loaf. If it comes out clean or with just a few moist crumbs, you're good to go.
The toothpick test, it never lets me down.
No.
Okay, let's talk muffins one more time. I love those individual servings, but I'm curious, does the baking time and temperature change when making muffins instead of a loaf?
Yes. When you're making muffins, you'll want to adjust the baking time, down to around 18 to 22 minutes. But keep the oven temperature at 350 degrees Fahrenheit.
Got it.
Because the muffins are smaller, they bake faster. So it's all about adapting to the format.
Okay, that makes sense. I think we've covered all the essential tips and variations. But before we wrap things up, I want to circle back to something we talked about earlier, the historical context of date nut bread.
Yes.
It's so fascinating how this simple loaf became a beloved staple, especially during times of scarcity.
It's really striking. Its enduring appeal, it's transcended generations. It's still a popular choice because it's simple, it's wholesome, and of course, delicious.
That's so well said. It really speaks to the power of tradition.
Yeah.
And the comfort that food brings. It's a reminder that even in tough times, people find a way to create something delicious.
Exactly.
So it brings us to the heart of this deep dive. Date nut bread, it's more than just a recipe, it's a story. A story of flavor, tradition, adaptability.
Yes.
It's a blank canvas for creativity. And it's a reminder that baking can bring simple pleasures.
You've captured it perfectly. It's about finding joy in the process, experimenting, sharing those creations with people we care about. It's about connecting with our culinary heritage and making it our own.
Exactly. So to our listener, as we wrap up this part of the deep dive, I really want to encourage you, embark on your own date nut bread adventure.
Yes.
Embrace the classic recipe.
Absolutely.
Explore the variations, but most importantly, have fun.
Yes. Have fun in the kitchen.
Yeah.
And, when we come back, we're going to leave you with a thought-provoking question, just to kind of inspire your baking journey.
Ooh, I love that. Okay. All right, so we've talked about the history, we've talked about that classic recipe, but now let's get to the fun part. Variations.
Oh, yes.
Because, the sources that you sent, they mentioned everything.
Everything.
Chocolate chips, coconut oil, gluten-free options. It's like date nut bread can be whatever you want it to be.
It really can. And it's fascinating how these variations, reflect these bigger trends in food.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like gluten-free baking, right?
Okay, yeah.
So the sources suggest using a gluten-free flour blend.
Right.
Or even, experimenting with almond flour, coconut flour, for, a grain-free twist.
I love that. It's like food's always evolving.
It is.
To meet people's needs.
Okay, but, some variations are just about, pure indulgence.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? Like chocolate chip date nut bread.
Oh, yeah.
Come on.
That's a classic for a reason.
It's calling my name.
So good. And it's such a simple addition, right? Chocolate chips.
Yeah.
But it just, elevates the sweetness, adds that little bit of decadence, and the sources recommend using dark chocolate.
Oh, interesting.
To create a flavor contrast, balances out the sweetness of the dates.
Oh, dark chocolate and dates. That sounds so good. Okay, but what if I'm in the mood for something, more tropical?
Yeah.
I noticed a variation that uses coconut oil.
Yes.
Any tips for that one?
Oh, yeah, coconut oil. That's a great option.
Okay.
It can definitely add that subtle tropical sweetness that goes so well with the dates. Key is using room temperature ingredients, including the coconut oil.
Okay.
Because that makes sure everything blends smoothly. You don't want a lumpy texture.
Right.
Think about it. When coconut oil's cold, it's solid.
Yeah.
Hard to mix in. Right.
But room temperature?
Yeah.
Nice and soft, pliable.
Okay, so room temperature it is. I'm writing that down. Now, what about dried fruits?
Oh, yeah.
Like cranberries, raisins.
Love it.
It's like a fruit explosion in every slice.
Yes. Dried fruits, they add such a wonderful textural complexity.
Okay.
Because you have that contrast with the softness of the bread.
Yeah.
The crunch of the nuts.
Yeah.
Remember, if you're adding a lot of dried fruit,
Yeah.
you might want to adjust the sugar in the recipe.
Oh, that's a good point.
Because dried fruits can be pretty sweet on their own.
Right, you want that balanced sweetness. Now, one of the sources mentioned adding citrus zest,
Ooh.
which I never would have thought of.
Yes.
Is that as good as it sounds?
It's surprisingly refreshing.
Okay.
Just a touch, you
yeah.
know? Lemon or orange zest
Yeah.
adds a bright citrusy note, kind of cuts through the sweetness, adds another layer of complexity. Think about it like how a squeeze of lemon brightens up, like a rich dish.
I do, yeah.
Same concept. Okay, citrus zest added to my list. But what if I want to make this, even more wholesome, boost the fiber content?
Well, you could experiment with whole wheat flour.
Oh, yeah.
Swapping out some or even all of the all-purpose flour for whole wheat flour adds a nutty flavor, slightly denser texture. It's a great way to increase the nutritional value without sacrificing taste.
Perfect. I like that. You're really encouraging experimentation because it's empowering.
It is.
I can adapt this recipe to fit my own, preferences and needs.
Exactly. Make it your own.
Okay. But sometimes I just want to go all out.
Oh, yeah.
Especially if I'm baking for a special occasion.
Yeah.
And cream cheese frosting
Yes.
on date nut bread. Brilliant.
I completely agree. The cream cheese frosting, it adds that touch of indulgence, transforms the bread into a dessert-worthy treat. And, for those who avoid dairy, there are plenty of delicious plant-based cream cheese options out there.
Perfect. Yeah. So no matter what, you can have your frosting and eat it too. Okay, before we move on from variations, I want to talk about something practical, okay? The Cooker Diary article, they mention making date nut bread ahead of time, which For busy people like me, that's perfect.
Yeah.
So what were their storage recommendations again?
They suggested storing it in an airtight container at room temperature for up to 3 days.
Okay.
And, to extend the shelf life, you can freeze it.
Oh, yeah.
Just wrap the loaf tightly in plastic wrap
Okay.
and then place it in a freezer-safe bag.
Okay.
And you can enjoy your homemade date nut bread for up to 3 months.
That's amazing. Okay, what if I'm using, like, pecans instead of walnuts, and one of the bread is done?
Yeah,
Does this toothpick test still apply?
absolutely. Toothpick test, classic for a reason.
It's reliable.
It is. Just insert a toothpick into the center of the loaf.
Mm-hmm.
Comes out clean. Or with just a few moist crumbs, you're good to go.
The toothpick test never lets me down.
Okay.
Okay, let's talk muffins one more time.
Okay.
I love the idea of individual servings, but I'm curious, does the baking time and temperature change when you're making muffins instead of a loaf?
Yes. When you're making muffins, you want to adjust that baking time down to like 18 to 22 minutes.
Got it.
But keep the oven temperature at 350 degrees Fahrenheit
Okay.
because they're smaller, they bake faster.
Right.
It's all about adapting to the format.
Okay, that makes sense.
Mhm.
I think we've covered all the essential tips, variations.
I think so.
But before we wrap things up, I want to circle back to something we talked about earlier, like the historical context of date nut bread.
Yes.
It's so fascinating how this simple loaf became such a beloved staple,
I know.
especially during times of scarcity.
And it's striking, its enduring appeal, it's transcended generations. Still a popular choice today
Yeah,
because it's simple, it's wholesome, and of course, delicious.
so well said.
Yeah.
It speaks to, like, the power of tradition,
Mm,
the comfort that food brings. It's a reminder that even in tough times, people find a way to create something delicious.
it really is.
So it brings us to the heart of this deep dive,
Yeah.
Date nut bread, it's more than just a recipe. It's a story. It's a story of flavor, tradition, adaptability.
Yes.
It's a blank canvas for creativity.
Mhm.
And it's a reminder of those simple pleasures that baking can bring.
You've captured it perfectly. It's about finding joy in the process,
Yeah.
experimenting, sharing those creations with people we care about, connecting with our culinary heritage, and making it our own.
Exactly. So, dear listener, as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, we really want to encourage you to, embark on your own date nut bread adventure.
Yes.
Embrace that classic recipe.
Absolutely.
Explore those variations.
Yes.
But most importantly, have fun in the kitchen.
Have fun. And, get ready, because in our final part, we're going to leave you with a thought-provoking question just to inspire your baking journey.
Okay, I love that. I'm ready. Welcome back. We're here for the final part of our date nut bread deep dive. It's been a journey,
It has, from those wartime kitchens to all the modern variations. It's pretty amazing.
I know, and now it's your turn.
To add to the story.
Exactly. So we've gone deep, right? The history, the classic recipe, all those twists and turns.
Yeah, but the real magic, it happens when you get creative.
Okay, so here's the question. As you picture that loaf, baking in your kitchen, all warm and fragrant, what personal touch would you add?
Yeah, what flavors speak to you?
Right. Would you sprinkle in some cardamom, for warmth? Or maybe like a swirl of orange zest for that citrus burst?
What about a pecan topping? Crunchy pecan topping.
Oh, yum. See, that's the thing about baking, right? It's a journey. It's
Yeah.
not just about the
You
destination.
gotta experiment, play with those flavors, textures. You might surprise yourself.
I love that. So it's more than just a recipe. It's like a springboard for your own culinary adventures.
Exactly. So go for it. Let your imagination run wild. And when you do, share it with us. We'd love to see your date nut bread creations, on social media.
Yes. Tell us all about it. Your favorite variations, the unexpected twists, even those happy accidents.
Because we love connecting with fellow bakers and seeing what you're moving up in your kitchens.
Yes. Until then, happy baking. May your homes be filled with that, irresistible aroma of date nut bread. Each loaf a unique reflection of you. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll catch you in the next one.